right, welcome to another episode of the Aetherica podcast. Uh, Joined with Ike Baker, and tonight we're going to be discussing uh, theurgic subject matters. How's it going, Ike?
Good. How are you?
Excellent. Happy to be back and doing a podcast with you because it's been too long.
Yeah, it's been a minute. That's for sure. I was just thinking the other day, we got to get back on a call. I miss doing that. And then literally that day you were like, "Hey, do you want a pod?"
So this will be fun. I've kind of prepared some questions, just based off of our classes that we've been doing with you with the theurgy classes, and then just a little bit of research on the side, trying to flesh out some ideas and some terminology and all of this. And so one of the first things is, I don't know how to pronounce this, so maybe you could help me. Voces Magicia, aka like magical words.
Oh, Vocus Magicae. Yeah, that's the Latin.
Okay. So that's the Latin. It's basically um these magical words of some sort. And so I wanted to ask you, if do we have, to your knowledge, any sense of like origin to these divine names? And I don't know if these are specific to Yamblekian theurgy, but yeah, if you're able to share any context around maybe the forces behind these names as well.
Sure. Well, one thing that I wanted to just kind of mention at the outset, Sky, you mentioned that we've been doing theurgy classes, and I just want to clarify for anybody that's listening and might be interested. I'm taking a group through the 12 dialogues, the 12 Platonic dialogues that are part of what's called the Iamblekian curriculum of the Platonic dialogues. And this is a prerequisite curriculum of reading, and the really it's supposed to be the acquisition of particular virtues along with this study, that was prerequisite to doing theurgy. So you didn't just, and I think that's important to say at the outset here. You didn't just say, I'm interested in theurgy now. I'm going to be a theurgist. And you buy a wand or you make a wand, and then now all of a sudden you're doing these high rites. There was a lot that had to happen first. Particularly in the sphere of the operator, you had to change and you had to undergo essentially, well, you had to climb, as it was put, the ladder of virtues before you could become a theurgist, and that entailed a radical divestiture of identity, belief, ideology, and a very slow and laborious climb towards self-knowledge and working in epistemology, understanding physics and metaphysics. And so along with this, certain virtues would have to be acquired that ultimately you would prove whether or not you had them based on your personality and how that changed, how that transformed your actions in the world. So that said, taking everybody kind of through those dialogues once a month, and I'm doing that. It's $15 per class, so extremely cheap, extremely cheap. Um, for the value. Now, for anybody who can't attend, we do Q&A. It's up on my Patreon usually the next day. And for $5, you can subscribe for $5 a month and watch those things as they come out. But don't ask me questions. You want to ask me questions, sign up for the God, just pay the money, you cheap bastard, and come to the Q so you can ask me, you can do Q&A uh face to face. Anyway, so you're talking about the Walkus Magicae, so the magical voice. Uh that is different a little bit from, well, you said you wanted to talk about theurgy, but we also said that it's based around the stuff that we're studying. So theurgy, right, as we have it now, in the modern day, there's all sorts of innovations that took place. For instance, when Ficino translated all the Platonic stuff or the Neoplatonic stuff, he had his own ideas about theurgy that he wrote in De Vita. And then you've got Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa, who does his own sort of um, distillation and transmission of Iamblichi and theurgy, highly influenced by Ficino. But he writes three books of occult philosophy, right? De Occulta Philosophy. And you've also got people like the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, the Aurum Solus. So there's a lot of work that's been done. There's a lot of things that have been added to theurgy as a living tradition. And you get a lot of those kind of, I don't know, I don't want to be insulting. Uh, But you get a lot of like the really hard-nosed people who can't see the forest for the trees that are constantly referring back to older is better. Ultimately, I think that's a mangled and meaningless perspective because then we don't have a living tradition, if that's it. Just because you're doing something that you think people were doing thousands of years ago, uh, to the exclusion of all other innovation, and then kind of touting that as this is the way everyone should be doing it, and this is what it really is. I think that's bereft of any insight or spiritual maturity. On the other hand, you had Iamblichus who averred like these rites should never be changed. They should never be altered. But then he didn't tell us what the rites were. so so there's a certain amount of plasticity we need to have in order to do this reconstruction and make it work for us. But essentially, if we're talking about the older stuff, we're going to be talking about, contemporaneous with the Iamblichus, we're going to be talking about asema onomata, the formless or meaningless names. What is called in the tradition the barbarous names of evocation. Now, those are you'll be familiar with that kind of stuff if you've studied the PGM in particular. There's a lot of vowels, yeah, long strings of vowels and things like that. And there's kind of always been this dual approach. Dr. Shaw talks about it in his latest book, Hellenic Tantra, where Iamblichus took the position that these names didn't necessarily mean anything, but that they were supposed to sort of generate a trance state. The vowels themselves were holy and they possessed a power that allowed us to reach that sort of supra-rational state, which means that if you had to posit that argument and make it clear, then there were obviously other people who were saying, trying to figure out what these names mean, right? Because they're not Greek. Uh, we don't really know 100% where they come from first, but we do see a lot of it in the PGM, right, which is Greco-Egyptian. And that's essentially those kinds of names are what Iamblichus talks about. They have a power in and of themselves that transcends the intellect. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what they mean. They can help put us into trance and divinize us, and they have a power in and of themselves. Now, when you look at later systems of theurgy or theurgic developments, they're not saying necessarily the same thing, right? Because Agrippa in particular, he really hones in on Hebrew. And so now we start having, rather than the asema onomata, the meaningless names, now we have the, um, you know, the I want to say the theon onomata or something like that to that effect, where it's like the names of God. You're now working, you've extracted yourself from a sort of non-Christian, non-Judeo-Christian framework that Iamblichus was working in, though he had many friends, he was trained by somebody who became a bishop. So Iamblichus he was very, whereas Porphyry and Plotinus wrote against the Christians and against the Gnostics, Iamblichus never really said a harsh word about Christianity. He was good friends with those people, but he didn't work in that milieu. So now we have in Agrippa, he's sort of relocating all this stuff to the divine names of God that are found in, the Tanakh and the Talmud and all these sorts of different things. And a lot of that comes down by way of Pico della Mirandola and Athanasius Kircher and these guys who were really, it was the advent of Christian Kabbalah that made everybody kind of go this way. Aside from, the staunch Christian, Judeo-Christian background in during the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, obviously. So it takes that turn. And then, so now what you're saying is not this like powerful string of vowels that doesn't necessarily mean anything, that is generating an ecstatic state in you, and also somehow, uh, you know, magnetizing spiritual force to you. Now you're actually intoning a name of God. So those are two very different things. And one is, I think, closer to mantra in a lot of ways, although you can use a divine name as a mantra. But what they have at their core, the similarity that they have at their core is they're both predicated on the belief that speech is somehow inherently divine. We have, you know, taken a lot of this stuff for granted. Because it comes so naturally and easily for so long to human beings, a sophisticated form of lingual communication, whereas it still retained uh, an air of the miraculous to those people, and they understood it for what it is, right? And you see it in the Judeo-Christian framework when God doesn't make light, he says, "Let there be light." And you also have that in the creator God Ptah of the Egyptians. I mean, his name sounds like somebody spitting. Ptah.
Ah,
Why? Because he spits creation forth out of his mouth. That's how he creates. He spits it out. It's a very similar thing going on here. It's, this infusion of news, of intellectual or intelligible meaning, an infusion of that somehow into the vibration of air.
mm.
It is miraculous. It is completely we're not anywhere near each other right now, and we're communicating with language. So those two differences are very hard line, but they're based on the same theory that there is an inherent magical spiritual power to words. And so in all systems of magic, that type of intoning of words, names, sounds is you can't do magic without it, really.
Is a mantra, is that like one of those, is that like, it's like Hare Krishna, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, is like one of those things? Like, is it like a,
Yeah. Om Mani Padme Hum. Yeah, yeah, that kind
like,
of stuff.
is that like an incantation or like, what would you, like, what is that? Is that
A
just,
mantra, well, a mantra is a little different because, and I don't know any esoteric, Buddhist beliefs, let's say, about it. I'm sure it can get a little wild, but in the West, at least, the way that we understand mantra is we understand it as a point of, it is a string of words that have meaning, that are focusing our attention on one idea. That could be devotional. It could be in Zen. It could be a koan or something like that. But you are hyper focusing the mind to reach some sort of revelatory state. And so it's slightly more psychological and less magical from that perspective. Whereas in the magical, paradigm, the worldview, a word itself has its own power, its own magical power. You see that a lot in ancient Egyptian mythology too. You know, when Isis obtains the true name of Ra, and now she has control, complete control over him because she knows his true name and she dares speak it. You know, so there's something about just words themselves that have an inherent quality that's not necessarily always associated with mantra, at least to my knowledge.
Okay, I want to ask you a question about something that's kind of a side thing, but um, it you talked about it when we were talking in the beginning, and I just wanted to bring it up before I forget. But you were talking about knowing thyself and self-knowledge, and just in the recent episode that, or in the recent discussion that we had on the theurgy class, um, you were talking about this as well with self-knowledge and the psyche. Um, and I was wondering, is what's meant by self-knowledge and knowledge of self is what is meant by that? Is that meant as the nature of the psyche as a universal sort of template, or is it meant to be um understood as the psyche as it is personal to the individual?
Well, there's a couple things I'd say. I'd say the first thing is that a lot of people throw that around, and I would say I've met probably two who know what the fuck they were talking about. Everybody else just kind of fucking bends that into whatever they need it to mean to make them seem spiritual, yet not send them on too inconvenient of a task. So Plato tells us via Socrates in the first Alcibiades. Granted, the authorship of the Alcibiades, first Alcibiades, is contested. There are some people who think it's Plato. There's a lot of people who don't think it's Plato. But either way, it's certain. Having read it, it is certainly in the Platonic spirit by somebody who understood the doctrine, and not only that, but if it was good enough for Iamblichus and the Theurgists, is good enough for me. Uh, Socrates says to Alcibiades after breaking him down completely. Now, mind you, this is among the aporetic dialogues that are meant to sort of exemplify the state of aporia, which is just not knowing, a state of intellectual impassibility that culminates in a divestiture of your ideologies, your deeply held beliefs, and therefore your identity. That has to drop away, and that's the beginning of initiation. And Proclus says that about the first Alcibiades. He says, let this then be the beginning of philosophy, the beginning of our work, which is nothing else other than know thyself. He says that in his commentary on the first Alcibiades. Now, the first Alcibiades, obviously, the first dialogue that we're recommended to read in the Iamblichian curriculum. And what Socrates says to Alcibiades after breaking him down completely, and Alcibiades is basically begging him, how do I know myself? What is self? And in no uncertain terms, Socrates says self is psyche, soul, soul. And that's a personal thing. That's not a universal thing. It's not an archetypal thing. At that basic point, you need to understand yourself as your soul. Now, we go into great detail about arguments for the soul and how it is structured, right? In the class that we did last night on the Phaedo, talking about the nature of the soul and the sickness of the soul, and philosophy as epistrophe or medicine to sort of rectify and get the logistikon out of the three parts of the soul, that rational part of the soul that has to guide life, getting that back reprioritized. And again, you say things now and people don't understand them because they don't understand the context. So you say, well, how is it the rational part of the soul that's supposed to lead, right? Because if that's the case, we associate rationality with quote unquote modern sort of, positivistic reductionist logic, which means if I'm becoming more logical in the modern sense, I'm becoming less spiritual. I'm moving away from that stuff. I'm getting cold and calculated and analytical. But in the Platonic sense, they the logistikon, the highest, most reasoning faculty of the psyche, which is the interior sort of experience of selfhood, thoughts, emotions, all that stuff, the interiority of the self as a unit, that is psyche, is soul. Uh, they the highest part of that was the only thing that could approach the divine and see its evidence everywhere. But the thing is that they had an understanding that there is a hard line between sensible and intelligible. And so sensibles are things that can be sort of apprehended and understood via the senses. And intelligibles are things that can only be apprehended and understood by the mind.
Mhm.
And they both have their own domains of authority. But intelligibles or really sensibles participate in some manner of the intelligibles. But the intelligibles are hierarchically more real than the things you see with your physical eyes. And so in the logistikon, the highest part of the soul, we're understanding that the invisible rules the visible. Whereas now we're not even going to think about the invisible because we have no evidence of it here. And so we actually cut ourselves off from our root, which is why probably for a lot of people right now, society feels like we're just floating further and further into a fucking abyss because we have, as a people, severed ourselves from the root because we disavow a priori disavowal of the intelligibles, the invisible aspect that is more real. It's like the rudder of a
Mm.
ship. You can't see it because it's below the water, but it's steering the whole fucking thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Damn. Yeah. That makes so much sense to me. I was thinking about like intelligible things kind of in the realm of like the noose. And then, if you have like the noose and then this key and then the material realm, intelligible things would probably be related to the realm of or like the noose, and then the material would be like the sensible. And then so there's this mm, obviously this over obsession with materiality that's lending to this sort of disconnection. But yeah, that made a lot
Yeah.
of sense.
People, it's very easy to convince people to believe in the unreality of the invisibles because it's a very scary thought. A lot of people say that theists and people who believe in metaphysical ideas and continuity of consciousness, the afterlife of the soul, etc., that we're doing this stuff because we somehow need an opiate. We somehow need reassurance. And I'll be honest with you, that's probably one of the dumbest fucking things I've ever heard in my life. And I've heard a lot of dumb shit because there is nothing reassuring about the fact that this ride doesn't end. My psyche, my consciousness, my soul is conditioned by the choices and experiences I have here. And ultimately, there is nothing I can truly hide from anyone or anything, most particularly the absolute. There is nothing comforting about spirituality when you really understand it. Um, it's like climbing up a mountain forever. There's nothing comforting about that.
Yeah.
So I think it's very reductive and stupid, and I think it allows people to sort of comfort themselves. They're saying that to comfort themselves because what happens is people don't want to be held accountable. They don't want to have to think that far into the future. They want somebody to do their thinking for them, and then they will just repeat what they've heard, but all the other fucking, parrots around them are squawking. And then if you threaten that in any way, shape, or form, they become immediately hostile. And that's for a lot of people, they'll just go through lifetimes of that.
Yeah.
So, the thing is there are numberless worlds. beyond this one, and they interpenetrate this one. And but particularly the aspect of you that can really experience and commune with those things, the nous, right, which is the highest function of the soul, that is not visible, and it is spiritual ultimately, and it is immortal. It cannot die.
Yeah.
Uh, and it's personal. It's absolutely personal. Yeah. But there's something pretty interesting too, because in a certain framework of maybe the Greek metaphysical anatomy, the idea that there's soma, body, right? That's like the salt of the person. There's psyche, soul, which is like the mercury, and then there's pneuma, spirit, which is like the sulfur. But the interesting thing is that these things kind of all lived in each other. Soul was like the psyche was inside the body, and then the pneuma wrapped both of those things, and in that sort of framework, in the Greek framework. But the pneuma, the spirit, which caused matter, even though the soul had died, right? If the soul leaves, matter is dead. Socrates says anything that soul occupies, it animates. But the thing is, if the soul leaves the body and the body dies, it doesn't immediately turn into sand or vaporize. It's still there holding form. So they posited that this pneuma spirit, this underlying intelligence of all things, caused matter, which was in and of itself inert and dead, to retain some form of shape. But they said within a person, the spirit of a person, within that dwelled the soul of a person and also a part of the soul of Zeus in
Hmm.
every person, which is, the creator, the chief God. It was that's a very, very interesting proposition there, that sort of coterminous arrangement of souls that make up the pneuma, the spirit, the central gravity or intelligence that adheres matter to all things.
Yeah. All right. So the use of so you answered a couple of the extra questions I had earlier because I was going to ask about when you were talking about the barbarous names. Um, Basically they're not like exclusive to any kind of culture or language. I think that might have like maybe barbarous names by their nature that has something to do with that they're not they don't have any like linguistic association or something like that. Um but then there's
Well, yeah,
the
they're called barbarous because the Greeks called foreigners like unsophisticated foreigners that were um not, they were sort of, they looked down at them in terms of their culture and things like that. They called them barbaros, right? Where we get the word barbarian. It's also the root of the word barber because they had really, really long beards and long hair. But the whole etymological root of it is that it's a sort of onomatopoeia, where they said that when these people spoke, there was no beauty to it. It sounded like barking dogs. Bark, 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 bark. So that's where we get the term barbarous. But the thing is, they were located outside of Greek culture, but we do see them in the Chaldean Oracles. Like we see them mentioned in, well, the fragments of the Chaldean Oracles which come down to us. There's a lot of talk about the Chaldean Oracles, but people don't realize we don't have fucking Chaldean Oracles. The version that you see Westcott translated, it's taken from all sorts of Platonists and Neoplatonists, their quotes regarding the Chaldean oracles and just other sayings of this kind of theurgic and theoretic art. So we don't have the Chaldean oracles, but we see in the version that we do have all the fragments that talks about, change not the barbarous names of evocation. So they're talking about these things. You cannot change them. They don't necessarily mean anything, but do not alter them. And then really, if you really wanted to see those long chains of vowels, you'd look at the PGM, or you'd look at stuff like the Book of Jehu or something like that. The Gnostics use all this stuff too.
Hmm. And then so there's the use of, and I thought I had a good kind of understanding of this word, but I don't know if I do. These sacred symbols or tokens or synthemata, magical passwords or tokens. How do these kind of come into play? Like, is a barbarous divine name itself considered synthemata, or are these both separate things?
So it's very good. That's a good question, and you're on to something here. This is something that is not easy for a lot of people to say, to really dig their teeth into. I think somebody like Greg Shaw would be like, maybe he'd think, oh, this is child's play, but ultimately, Iamblichus is. It's not that he's vague; it's that there's contradictory use of the terms throughout the literature outside of Iamblichus and all sorts of things like that. Proclus innovates a lot of this stuff, but essentially, what the way that I conceive of the synthemata and the symbola is this. I'm going to start with the synthemata, the deeper stuff, the more mysterious. You can synthemata and Agrippa's sigillum, signatures, are a one-to-one. He took the term synthemata, signature, and he translated it to Latin, the lingua franca of his day, sigillum. They're the same thing. Signatures. These are the occultem virtutem, the occult powers, the things which cannot be seen with the eye. He goes to great lengths to say that you need to figure out what the signatures are by deducing the various properties of things. And this he says unequivocally, without altering their structure. So Agrippa's not talking about alchemy. He's not talking about physically breaking things down. He doesn't call that magic. Magic, miracle working, that he says, is based on if you can figure all that shit out without taking it apart. So that's that's the art, right? Is figuring out, and we see vestiges of this in humoral medicine, in Chinese traditional medicine and herbalism. They're looking at qualities, really that sort of Agrippan square of the elements, or the Empedoclean square of the elements: hot, cold, wet, dry, and various permutations and combinations of that, to see where do they fall on the square. We know that hot and dry is directly opposite wet and cold, fire versus water. So we use those things to control. If water's out of control, we're going to try and use fire to dissipate. If ever fire's out of control, we're going to use a little bit of water to try and, we're not going to use air. Air stokes the fire. We're not going to use earth, because the fire, that's food for fire. The fire needs earth to burn. So it's this way of looking at things based on the symbola, which is the color, where it grows, what it smells like, what it tastes like. So the symbola is the thing that can be deduced, the actual property, and that also extends to words, because we see various names and sounds being referred to as symbola. So, but that is the ostensible thing. I heard you say, E-I-E-I-O. And so I can reproduce that. But what I can't see, what I can in no way deduce from hearing you say that or seeing you say that, is the synthemata, the occult virtue. I will never be able to see the occult virtue. I will only be able to see its effects.
Ah,
And the
okay.
effects are the various
Mm,
symbola. It's the same thing with the Platonic forms that I talked about the other night. The Platonic forms are numbers. Platonism is an extension, an elaboration of Pythagoreanism.
mm.
So I can tell you, Sky, go out and bring me three. Go get me three. And you say, three of what? And then I just said, just three, bring me three. You could bring me three oranges. You could bring me three pairs of shoes. But you can't bring me three. You want to bring one of those little numbers that they sell on Home Depot that you buy and you put on your mailbox or the front of your house, it's still the symbol doesn't mean anything. That's the symbola. The symbola is the three, the Arabic numeral that we use to identify the quality of being more than two, but less than four. But nowhere in this universe can you ever find true three. That's because it's a form. It's not in the realm of becoming. The realm of becoming participates its being, which resides outside of space and time. And in the same way, I can see the symbola, but I can't see the synthemata. The synthemata resides in the symbol. I can figure out, I can deduce the synthemata by approaching the symbola. So it's very tricky to kind of figure that out, especially when you're reading the literature, because not all of it agrees with itself throughout the overarching tradition.
Wow. Okay, thank you. That was awesome. So then there's this term, telestic. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Something to do
You're
with
doing great.
invoking at a distance or transferring divine powers via words and symbols. But is there something about it that's like at a distance? That's what I was coming across when I was kind of looking up this term, telestic. Uh,
Well,
yeah.
Telestic is based off of tele or tetele, which means completion, finishing. Uh, so what Telestic is basically, and I'm gonna probably abut upon another one of your terms. It's the empsychosis, the ensoulment of
Oh.
agalma, a statue or symbola. You put a bunch of symbola together that all agrees with that has the same. If you take the symbola and say, okay, this is red, this is hot, this is spicy, we're looking at fire, we're looking at energy, so this is martial, so Aries. So we're going to take the red, we're going to take the hot, we're going to take the spicy, we're going to take the fiery, and we're going to make out of all those symbola which have synthemata in them that we can't see, we're going to make a statue of the god Aries out of that. That statue is Agalma. You used all the symbola, you made Agalma, a statue. Now, what you do, and really at that point, it's an icon. But the tetelistic art allows the theurgist to draw the power, the soul of the god, some portion of it, into this thing, which before did had only its symbola and synthemata, and link the soul of the god in actuality
Hmm.
to the statue, to the agama. That is one form, probably the primary form of telestic. It's a type of initiation because as soon as, right, psychosis, that means ensoulment. I have now ensouled the statue. And what did we say that Plato said or Socrates said? The soul brings life to anything it occupies. So the minute I have completed that telestic, the minute I have accomplished that, that thing is alive. And
So
we see that. Go ahead.
so telestic is sort of is this like a form of practice under the broader practice of theurgy, like a specialized theurgic art within theurgy?
It's a technique.
Hmm. Okay.
Yeah, it's a technique that most of the time when we're talking about it, we are applying it to things like talismans. We're applying it to things like animating the statue. We're ensouling things. We are divinizing things, and in being the mediating capacity between in that art, we are divinizing ourselves. Um, and so, like I tell people all the time, there's very little magic outside of talismanic magic. So you want to consecrate it, you want to make a tool and consecrate a tool. It becomes a talisman. You're ensouling it, you're giving that thing power. You want to make a talisman, Well, okay, we know that's talismanic. You want to ensoul a statue, do the opening of the mouth center ceremony. That's talismanic to a degree. You are linking the synthemata to the cosmic soul of the deity, which we call, you know, the energy, or in a modern term, not in a Greek term,
Mm.
but initiation in a modern context. What are you doing? I mean, you're doing the same thing. If you are going through an alchemical initiation, you are in the process of vivifying and empowering with soul, with spirit, with pneuma, the candidate. So there's very little magic in terms of theurgy that doesn't have to do with telestic, which is the broader term for telestic. I would say is just initiation. In the Golden Dawn system, when you're using the formula of light and you get into the higher grades of the Golden Dawn, and that's what you're not just doing these kind of like 3 page sort of micro rituals of like consecrating a talisman, very easy, very light. Uh, probably. So when you work the Z formula of the magic of the light, which they claim to have been theurgy, you are taking the talisman around as if it's undergoing an initiation. You put the talisman through the neophyte ritual,
Mm.
and then when it's consecrated, you say, creature of talismans. Why creature? Because it's fucking alive now. It's alive. Telestic. I mean, so I'm giving you a little bit of the ancient stuff with the statue animation, and I'm also giving you the more modern practice of, that talismanic consecration, which we consider to be an animation of the talisman as well.
Mm. So then what is the role or the nature of what is referred to as icones, or like these forms of nous, Saki, or the material realm, and their use in ritual? They're like eikones, icones. Uh
Icones is, they still use it here. It's still used in the Orthodox Church. This is an icon, icon, icones,
oh, okay. So then
icon.
is it like, so would you take so there would be particular icons or icones related to either the nous or the Saki or the material realm, and some sort of theurgical ritual, and they would then use this process of psychosis to ensoul these
So,
icons.
so what it would be is when I construct the agalma means statue,
Hmm.
likeness, image. When I construct the agalma with the proper symbola, so we would call that, the correspondences. It's if it's Aries, it's wearing red, it's got a sword, it's he's very athletic. There's some fire burning in front of him. Maybe there's tobacco. His hair's made out of like tobacco leaf or something like that. Uh, that now is an icon, but you undergo the theurgic art of telestic, and you ensoul the icon, and that in and of itself is the technique. So we're kind of orbiting around terms that are all referring to this psychosis, this art. We're talking about different stages of that psychosis, which it's a big part of theurgy. But the thing is, it's more magicians want shit to do.
Hmm.
They want to have projects, and they likely don't want to do stuff that's like way out of their wheelhouse. They find the little niche magic that they like to do, and then they say, well, if it's spiritual or if it's contemplative, it's not really my thing. Most magicians are doing what's fucking trendy, which is what? Astrological magic, which is what? The consecration of talismans, because it's fucking easy. We got plenty of that stuff, and it's a distraction from real spiritual development. Uh, Look what I did. I'm a magus. I brought the sun into this talisman, by commanding the spirits. Now this is a theurgic art, but it's not the ultimate fucking thing. It's supplementary to henosis. What we want to do is we want to unite with the God. You know, that's what we want to do. And everything else is ancillary. It's supplementary to that goal. So you'll see stuff like Telestic and statue animation and talismanic consecration because it's super popular right now. You know, you're not going to see a lot like the thing people make a mistake in drawing a hard division between Theoria and Theurgia because Theoria is a big part of theurgy. Divine contemplation is a huge part of theurgy. So it's not theurgy as we just do ritual. It's theurgy as we do the contemplative stuff and we also do ritual.
Hmm.
So it's both of those things. But the focus is on achieving divine union and our nous, the highest function of our soul, merging with the divine nous, hypostatic nous, and having that experience and then doing that over and over and over until we gain what we call stable realization. Now, and really that would be considered the divinization of the self. You would become theosis, you become a god or like a god at that
Wow.
point, according to Iamblichus. So that's the important stuff. But the Telestic is it's hot right now. It's I'm not trying to disparage it. It's a big part of the work. It's a big part, but at the end of the day, it's there's other stuff that I think, especially the people that are focusing a lot on theurgy right now, we should be talking about other stuff. I really enjoyed what Dr. Shaw did. I don't agree with all of his, and it's not that I disagree completely 110% diametrically opposed. I think that I think we're mincing words here in a certain way, but I like the fact that he focused on the asema onomata, the the meaningless names. And he didn't try to over divinize them and he didn't try to make them overly technical. But he talked about them in a very practical way. I think that's something that's probably boring for a lot of people, to sit there and just go, oh, yeah, oh, yeah. Like most magicians don't want to necessarily have to do that. So, but yeah, I mean, the Telestic is it can be applied to statue animation, talismanic consecration, but it can also be applied to the soul of the initiate, right? Because there's a certain kind of psychosis that's happening when your psyche, your nous merges with the nous of the god. You're almost acting like a talismanic ground for that deity. So all of it is Telestic, if you ask me,
Okay.
which you clearly have.
Which I did. So then, I wonder, like, is this sort of psychosis? Is this what was going on with Zosimos and his statue animation, or is that like a totally different thing?
Well, I don't know how much statue animation he was actually doing,
Hmm.
but yes, it would. I know he was involved. He was a priest scribe for the metallurgists. They undertook the endeavor of the dyeing of metals for religious statuary. And so yes, religious statuary on the whole would have been ensouled. We know that this is an art that was inherited from the Egyptians. And not only do we know that because we see it on the historical record, but Iamblichus says that, right? It's
Hmm.
not called On the Mysteries of the Greeks or the Syrians or the Tyrians or the Phoenicians. It's
Egyptian.
on the mysteries of the Egyptians, Chaldeans, and Assyrians.
Mm.
So yeah, it's they would very much have been doing that.
Okay, and then so now this would bring me to a question about the forces that are being I forget the word, imbibed into these statues. And then what these statues would be depicted as. Like, would it be like Zeus, Apollo, Hecate? Like, I guess Hecate would be like Egyptian, but like Zeus and Apollo would be Greek. And then so if it's on the mysteries of the Egyptians, Chaldean
Well,
song.
no, Hecate was very much you know, a part of Greek culture.
Oh, okay.
Hecate was Egyptian. Hecate
Oh,
was the Greek importation, very much Greek.
hmm.
But you don't see her in like the Homeric stuff. She is a later sort of importation, but still quintessentially Greek. Yes, you would have those different kinds of deities, those the statue animation.
And
It
then
was, you know, you would essentially try to reach noetic union with the divine, with the hypostatic nous. The way that you would get there is by sort of having union with the various gods. Why? Because the gods are ineffable. Their essence is tantamount to a form, but their visible bodies, their symbola, are the planets. So this is the whole fucking thing is right. We're talking about rising through the spheres, climbing the planetary ladder. It's the same thing. It's this is we've just now ventured into with the theurgic material and extremely sophisticated literature about it. But it's the same thing. The gods were equated to the planets a lot of the time, or stars or things like that. So that's why you see in theurgy and in the traditions that come out of it, like Gnosticism, there's tons of cosmic maps.
okay, and then so like this term Hira, Hiera, is this kind of speaking about like the physical
Mhm.
items that would be used in ritual, like sacred objects, and then would would statues be something that's included as like Hyra, like stone statues,
Yerea is
herbs? Is this just kind of like
Yerea is sorry the lag. The Yerea is in Greek. It just means it's the feminine form of like priest or holy one.
oh
Like in the Golden Dawn
oh
ritual, there's
Hyreus?
Hiereus, Yereos, or Hierophantes, right? The high priest, which is the revealer of the light. Um, So Yerea is the female form of Yeros, which is Hyreus, uh, the priest. So the way that I've seen this in theurgy is that they call certain acts in theurgy the hieratic art, and the act of telestic is one of the hieratic arts. So that's my understanding of Yera, but I don't know what were your sources for that particular term. I'm interested to
Uh,
like how you applied it to the actual objects is unfamiliar to me.
I think I just Googled Hyra in the context of Yamblikian
Okay.
theurgy, or I did it the opposite. I was looking up Yamblikian theurgic operations or something like that, and I came across Hyra. And what it was saying is that it was speaking about physical items used in the ritual, and things
Let
like
me ask you a
sacred.
question. So if you're Googling that stuff, are you getting that from sort of source articles, or is it the AI thing that comes up?
It's the AI thing that comes up.
Okay, so I'm telling you right now, not just about like theurgy and esoteric stuff.
Yeah.
So far, out of maybe like 50 searches I've done, almost every single one of them has been wrong.
Ah, well, this is good then
The
because
AI, you
yeah,
just you just got to scroll down a little further and start looking at the actual like documents.
yeah.
AI cannot contextualize. I remember I asked it to show me who the Grandmaster of Masons was for the state of Georgia, and it like brought up some Australian guy who's been dead for 10 years. So I was like, this fucking thing is not right. I
Yeah,
embarked upon like a series of experiments, and I
that's
think
good. Yeah.
Every single one except for one of them was almost completely wrong. So
Damn.
this is good. We're talking about this. I want our audience to
It
hear
is.
this.
We're exploiting the weaknesses of these modern AI technologies, which is great. So as for ritual gestures and movements, I was looking for a term for this. I don't know if this is an accurate term or not. You can correct me if I'm wrong. I came across a word called uh, cheronomia, and it said this is usually a method for conducting music and a way to express emotion, but in the context of theurgy, something in regards to particular ritual gesture movements. I don't know. There might be like a different terminology, but I think that ritual gesture movements are something included in theurgic operations. Maybe, maybe not. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I mean, chironomia. So, when you look at something like so in Zosimos's time, right, when he was, it's what? So that's maybe like fourth, fifth century. Really, you see the beginning of modern alchemy start then, but it's not called alchemy, right? It can't be called alchemy because alchemy includes the Arabic prefix al, meaning the. So what he calls it is kairochmeta, things made by hand. So chironomia is pretty strange because it means like hand names or hand naming, right? Nomia, nomen in Latin, but onoma, like we said before, asema, onomata, the meaningless names. So chironomia would be like hand naming or hand names. I like that. I think that that's a really nice term to apply to theurgy. I can't say that I've necessarily heard that before, but I think it's excellent. I think ritual gestures are very, very important. So now here's where I break a little bit with the Iamblichian sort of reconstruction that people have been doing. I listened to I listened to the Magician and the Fool podcast, and a bunch of friends were on there. I know almost all those people. It was really great, and they were talking about what a modern theurgic praxis looks like, or at least they were supposed to be talking about that. I went through about an hour and change, maybe 45 minutes of the podcast, and then there was no actual ritualistic practice for theurgy. They never list it. And I think a lot of people are afraid to do so because Iamblichus didn't leave us shit. Nobody left us anything. Danny Newman kind of points to Homer, right? And the writings in the Iliad of the funeral pyre of Patroclus. And there's definitely some stuff in there. And I'm pretty sure he's done some work that he calls the rite of elevation that it uses entheogens. But there's nothing that tells us the ritual protocols. So I have to break. You have to break. This has to be reconstructed. So whether Iamblichus would have liked that or not, the gods have willed it so. We must rebuild. It is meet and right to do so. We have to reconstruct and try and achieve some sort of divine inspiration to help us reconstruct this right, which I think is exactly what's going on. That spirit is working in the world right now.
Yeah.
But ritual gestures, I prefer to lean on somebody like Eliade, Mircea Eliade. Um, he talks about the fineness and the exactitude of ritual symbols, and the fact the main difference isn't even in what is done, in so much as it is in what state of mind is it done. Right? His famous book, The Sacred and the Profane. The whole discussion is what does profane mean, profanum, outside of the temple? It's another term. It's a term he's applying to the non-religious. What is the profane or non-religious individual? How do they experience the world as opposed to the religious, the sacralized human being? And so he goes back to the ancient sort of religions. And I like the fact that he's drawing from these indigenous Aboriginal tribes instead of pulling from, what everybody likes, the Egyptians, the Greeks, the Romans, the Chaldeans. He's not talking about any of that. He's talking about these little Aboriginal tribes all over the world. And he's basically, and this is good, right? Because I mean, they share, theurgy at some point on the historical timeline really shared some stuff with this shamanic path. Jake Stratton Kent has talked about that. Danny Newman has talked about that. I think Stratton Kent, he got the wrong end of the stick because he really wanted something to be so. So he just relentlessly kind of shoehorned and beat people over the head and threw like just this waves of information at them. And so a lot of people, I like to call them the bastard orphans of J.K. Rowling and Jake Stratton Kent, are are the people on on Instagram or Facebook who have some sort of weird wolfsbane or raven wolf or something like that. Some kind of stupid fucking name. They
Ravenwolf.
just total artifice, total bullshit. But they're all like, those people that have to like reinvent themselves on the internet. They take that stuff and they kind of, they absorbed it, and it's a confirmation bias, and it sounds really sophisticated. So we're gonna go with Jake Stratton Kent. But regardless of the reductionistic viewpoint, the oversimplification, and the clear and present bias, there are some similarities to that chthonic origin, that shamanic origin, and theurgy. Um, so what Eliade says is basically all of these gestures have to do with what we might call in the Hebrew tradition of magic, the Kabbalistic tradition, Ma'aseh Bereshit, the work of the beginning. And so ritual gestures and even the simplest things, the ritual accoutrement, what maybe we call the symbola of ritual, all of these things have to do, they are ritualized and therefore sacralized recapitulations done in a sacralized or religious state of soul, of nous, of high mind, that make the religious person contemporaneous to the gods in their work at the beginning of creation. So I think that ritual gesture has so much to do with that stuff. In particular, you know, it can be simple, but there are layers of meaning. One really great example of this is in Masonry. For anybody who's listening, a ritual gesture having to do with the forearm and the hand. Don't worry, don't freak out. I'm not giving any of the signs away or the tokens. Please sit down. You know me better than that, I hope. But something having to do with what we understand to be the master of the lodge. Now, the master is the one who sets the craft to work and gives them proper instruction. So the master is not just the guy who's like really good at making stuff. He's actually the one who brings order. And in that way, in bringing order to the workmen, that they may create his designs, he mimics God, the creative God that brings order to the universe. And what is the implement of the master in the ritual? The gavel. And what does he do when he wants us to stand or sit? Boom, 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 boom. What's that famous image we have of a judge taking control of their court? Boom, boom, order, boom, boom, order in the court. This gesture with the gavel in and of itself is, I bring order. So it's something so simple that when it's sacralized, when it's done in a religious state by a religious person, fuck spiritual. We're not talking about that. Religiosity, this resacralization of the psyche knowing itself as a divine participant, knowing that it is more, trusting its intuition about itself. Your eyes and your ears lie to you all the fucking time. We're not going to trust the sensible. We will trust the intelligible. Okay? Done in that state of mind, that the master is contemporaneous with the creator of the universe. And when he strikes that gavel, it is the master of the creator of the universe. The grand architect is, he is the gavel of the grand architect. Now, now you see what I'm saying. We're talking about empsychosis. We're talking about divine union in a way, or divine participation. And that is a technique of theurgy, is what we call theomorphia, taking the form of the god, which in the Golden Dawn and modern tradition we call the assumption of god forms. And Isadora Forrest has done a tremendous amount of work on that, which is excellent. She has an essay in one of the light extended volumes. I think it's either one or two, where she has I put on the cloak of the great lady, I am the great lady, and she talks about this Egyptian. You can see it in the pyramid text and the coffin text. These techniques of the ritualized taking the form of the god. In other words, it's actually an invocation of the god, and we call that theomorphia. And this can be done by ritual gestures. That's all part of it, right? People say sometimes, like, you got to be careful. You want to worship Hephaestus? He was a lame god. Kirk White talks about this. If you become a devotee of Hephaestus or a lame god, you're going to take on those attributes. You see people over time that work closely with gods like that, that begin walking with a limp, and it's the same thing. You want to work with a fiery god, better be careful. You can have quite a temper, so this is what we're talking about when we're talking about divine union. And these are the techniques that we use. Ritual gesture is extremely important.
So is this, I remember there was a particular, I don't know, I think it was one of the um wow, like the symposium video presentations or something, and there was like this segment in it where there was this like sort of ritual gesture in relation to the Hebrew letters. And then I was thinking of also like it kind of reminded me of Rudolf Steiner has something called I think it's arrhythmia, and it's like this form of, I don't know if it's like sacred dance or whatever, where there's like these postures. And that's what was like kind of coming to my mind when I was
Mhm.
thinking of ritual gestures. But then I was also thinking of like gestures like in things like the Golden Dawn tradition, and just these different gestures that are made. Um, but I guess that can be like a pretty wide uh array of various gestures that could be utilized for different purposes, but maybe in the same way that we are using speech to vocalize these divine names is a similar thing. We're using our physical bodies to um, perform some sort of gestures that are some of them that can be divine, just like divine names are divine or something like that.
Yeah. Well, and they also, if you assume the posture of a god in particular, it's a kind of attenuated invocation. It will change your consciousness if done in the proper state. You're sitting there giggling, as we say in masonry, burlesquing the ritual, you're not going to have that experience. You want to stand with your sword raised and your foot on the head of the fucking dragon as the Archangel Michael, and hold that position and feel what that feels like. You will have some sort of, that's an invocation of his
Mm.
power to an attenuated degree. But a lot of that has to do with your nous, your psyche, the state you're in. Now, on the other hand, well, and we see it in masonry too, right? The do guard and the sign, which I'm not going to talk too much about, and I'm certainly not going to show you what it is, because these are the secrets of masonry: the tokens, the words, and the do guards and signs. That's the only secrets in masonry, is just how we identify each other. But they are great examples of ritual gestures. Now, I do believe that there is an esoteric significance to them that particularly comes out of the Bektashi sect of Sufism, believe it or not, or at least is our best bet at kind of figuring out what that means. And we have the Greeks talked about it, the okima, right? We have the luminous vehicle, the chariot. We have the avroe di soma, right? The egg form body, the luminous body. We're talking about our energy fields. The Greeks believe this stuff. This is a new agey. They believed in the energy field. All of these cultures believed in it. The Vedic, right, with prana, the Taoist and other forms of Chinese spirituality, chi, right? They have all this stuff. So, how do you work with energy? By postures and movements. And so, yes, there is going to be an energetic significance to
I
all of
think you
your
might have a
movement.
book coming out about similar subject matters.
I do. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. April 8th via Llewellyn, Etheric Magic, a complete system of elemental, celestial, and alchemical magic. I know it was fast, but I wrote both books at the same time. That's the only way I was able to do that.
Heck yeah. And then
Yeah.
okay, so I've got like a couple more. Uh as for ritual structure, I don't know if there is any standard structure in terms of at least in particular Yambliki and theurgic ritual operations, or if, some aspects are inevitably having to be reconstructed. Um, but what is it? What does a ritual structure look like, if you're able to describe like that sort of thing?
Yeah. Well, the thing about it is that Iamblichus essentially gives us so many fucking techniques that we're like, how does this all fit together? And he'll tell us theoretically how it all fits together, but there is virtually no picture painted. Shaw talks about how he gives us a little bit, but still is not enough to construct a ritual. Uh, I would say in the classical sense, though, I will say this: nothing that we have looked at, really, very little that we have looked at historically, primary sources from either the PGM or other ritual text or Taoist ritual text or whatever it is, what have you. Very little of it looks so fucking different that we're like, no, oh my God, it's not like earth shattering. Ritual is ritual. Uh, Part of that is that the template is in some way meant to culminate, right? So there's a movement, there's a proximity. We can liken it to movies, or I'm sorry, to music or plays. In modern ritual, particularly in the Golden Dawn, we have three acts, and normally a prolegomena, right? A preface. It's the same way that Plato wrote his dialogues. Plato wrote all his dialogues in tetrads, okay? Series of four, because that was in line. He was writing plays. Not everybody wrote like that. It was very unique. He didn't write these long stream of consciousness discourses. He wrote in plays to be acted out and read like conversations. And so he structured his dialogues in that way. And but a lot of people don't realize, yes, plays always take place in three acts, but that's the play itself. There's normally a prologue, and that is sung by a choir, right? So when you look at the epistemological dialogues of Plato, the Cratylus, the Theaetetus, the Sophist, and the Statesman, Cratylus basically covers all the ground that they're going to cover, but in much less pages. It's essentially a preface to the epistemological canon, which goes into greater detail and starts bringing in the forms and all stuff like that. So ritual can operate and typically does operate in the same way in really three parts with a preface or a prologue, I should say. And we want to, there's always ritual preparations. You always have to prepare for ritual. We see that even in the grimoire and goetic traditions. There's fasting, there's prayer, which in the theurgic sort of, lexicon or group of techniques, it's a prosuche, okay, which is related to the Greek word prosuche, which now you tell people pray means be careful. You know, if you're going to slip on ice, you say prosike, and but the archaic meaning of that means pray or prayer. So that is a technique. There's prayer, there's fasting, there is ritual cleansing. There is suffumigations. We see that even in things like the Coptic liturgy, where the Coptic, a big part of the Coptic liturgy, the Orthodox Coptic Christian liturgy, right, coming out of Egypt, is the offering of incense. The priests go there Saturday night to fumigate and offer incense. They usually stay there late, uh, in some cases the whole night, and they just go straight into the ritual of the Eucharist. You know, the Mass of the Eucharist, I should say. But so there is a preparation period. There is a period of procession or entering the sacred space. There is a period of preparation of the sacred space, which entails usually censing and asperging. Censing is purification by smoke, by fire, and asperging is cleansing, purification by water. Or sometimes they use oil. After that, you basically have your ritual form of the opening. There is some kind of invocation. You know, uh, it's like Masons put it in their ritual by saying, no man should enter into any great or important undertaking without first invoking the blessings of deity. So we pray to God or Allah or Hashem, whatever you're right. Because Masonry, you don't have to be a certain religion to be doing this, and we all do it together at the same time. But in a temple of Zeus, there would be some kind of appeal to Zeus, some kind of prayer to Zeus. And then after that opening, there is a working. And the working is the second act, the climax. But within that second act, there's a period of crescendo that's building towards something that's heightening. Now we're trying to elevate the consciousness, and sometimes we do that via something like trance, something that generates a divine ecstasy. What does ecstasy mean? It comes from the Greek word ekstasis, to stand outside of oneself, an out of body experience, to move out so that the deity can come in. You become the talisman of the deity. You become the icon of the deity. So there's that, and there can be sort of prophetic things that come from that, where you speak truths or speak oracles and things like that. But typically, that's a mantia, the divine madness. Now, the difference is we see movies about oracles and things like that, and we think they're completely coherent. Plato says it multiple times, and it's attested throughout wider literature. There's always somebody who says the oracles, and then somebody who interprets them. Because the person who is saying the oracle has no fucking clue what they're saying. It doesn't sound like ominous and foreshadowing. It sounds crazy. It doesn't make any sense. So you need somebody standing next to them that's interpreting what's being said and kind of acting as a mediator, because it's mantia. It's not inspiration. That's for the muses. The muses inspire to poetry and things like that. Mantia is fucking madness. You go crazy for like a couple of minutes. You have like a fucking psychotic break with the world. So that is divine madness.
Oh
So
man.
then now not all rituals are based on that. You could be this particular day, an hour, we're going in and we're going to do Telestic. We're going to animate a statue, or we're going to consecrate a talisman. And so the moment of consecration and the moment of charge, what we call charging, giving that talisman, you point out, a creature of
So we're like
Venus,
ensouling it.
ensouling it, the psychosis, that whole process, and then, but you also charging it.
Oh,
So
okay.
now that it's been born, now that it's ensouled, now
Mm,
that it's a living thing, you don't call it, creature of talismans,
okay.
or creature of copper. You say creature of Aphrodite, creature of Venus, because it's like, or address it as great
Mm,
Aphrodite,
yeah.
great Venus. You're addressing it as, you do the same thing at an invocation. You want to invoke the god, you say, thou art this. Thou art that. Thou art the great scaler of the heavens. Thou who ridest upon the cloud as a mighty steeds. Thou who does this. And then it slowly inverts and says, it goes from you are, you who, you do to I am. I are, or I am, I do. And you slowly ensoul yourself. You transfer the locus of focus. You're calling the God by saying, you who do this, you who do that. But then finally it comes in and I am he who has sight in the feet, like
Yeah.
from the headless ritual and all that stuff. So again,
Oh,
a telistic ritual there. There's very little you can do that doesn't have some kind of talismanic nature to it in magic.
somebody just mentioned the headless ritual to me the other day, and they were like, I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do an LBRP or something, and they're like, oh, you should do more than that. You should do the headless ritual. And I was like, what's the
Yeah,
headless
fuck
ritual?
him.
And then he's like, well, it's kind of dangerous, but da da da. And I was like, well, I don't know if I want to fucking do that. But you just said headless ritual or something. So what's up with
Yeah.
the headless ritual?
It's something from the PGM that was rewritten by Crowley, that was used by him
Ah, makes
for
sense.
an invocation of the holy guardian angel
Okay.
by referring to it as the headless one.
Mm.
They call it the bornless one. And people say, well, no, it's just he has no
Uh,
head. But the thing is, one of the hieroglyphs in that situation for beginning is the picture of a head. So to picture the God form with no head is to say the beginningless one, the one who has no beginning. So it's an invocation of the eternal one, which is kind of their way of, we don't really fucking know, but Iamblichus tells his student each person has a personal diamond, and that personal diamond ultimately is under the auspices of the god of diamonds. And very vague. We're still trying to parse this out. Not everybody knows what he's talking about. But I would say that the headless or the eternal one, the bornless one, particularly knowing what I do of the higher divine genius, is kind of an invocation of the higher divine genius, because the higher divine genius is the part of us that isn't born, the part of us,
mm,
our spiritual architecture that didn't come in with us. Like where there's a connection,
yeah.
but it's not external, it's not objectified. It's the If you want to talk about it kabbalistically, it's the Yetziratic part of us, the angelic part of us. It's not exteriorized. So I would say that that is what the headless ritual is kind of doing in that context. That's at least that's what Crowley and them were trying to do with it. But the thing is, you don't gotta fucking do any of that, And like to be so cavalier about it is like, what are you retarded? Like what do you like? Why are you doing this? Because it's cool. Oh, bro, you shouldn't do that. It's like, oh yeah, like
I know.
I have problems with my stomach, so I'm having a little bit of mint tea. And the guy comes over and be like, fuck that, dude, blow it out with gasoline, take some Pepto, bro. And it's just like there's
Dude,
no
you need
finesse,
2 gallons of
there's no subtlety.
ayahuasca right away.
Yeah, exactly. It's just somebody who's just trying to flax nuts with magic, which is insane because only us fucking idiots dress up in robes and nemesis and waving wands and doing names. We're the only people who care about this shit.
Yeah.
So it's weird when people try to like impress each other and peer pressure
Yeah.
each other to me. It's like I don't get it.
It's fucking hilarious. Um, is there like a ritual? Maybe this is like a theurgic thing, but like, because you're talking about one of the specific things you're talking about, like installing a statue or something with this Venus or Venusian quality, and then transferring it over to yourself. Could you do something where you're basically essentially just doing all of the planets and then um over and ensouling all of the planetary influences or something like that? Is there like a ritual or something like that?
I would not do that.
Okay.
Uh, there are rituals and what you're talking about in terms of like a statue.
Mm.
That it wouldn't make any sense. You could do that to a temple. You could make something that is an image of the universe. You can make something that is even an image of a temple of the universe. But I wouldn't necessarily make like a pantheon in one figure.
Mm.
What what we do actually in the Golden Dawn, for instance, is we have planetary. We have an implement that is specifically for planetary work, and we have an implement that is specifically for zodiacal work. There's a little bit of interplay. You use both of them together sometimes. We also have some implements that get used together that are for elemental work. So the one that's zodiacal, these are all based on Egyptian implements that we see in the hieroglyphs and things like that, and found in as temple booty, when the English people went over there and extracted all that stuff. The zodiacal implement is the lotus wand. And so each band on that zodiacal on the lotus wand is consecrated. You are literally taking a piece of the planet and using color, because color gets rid of the need to go find Symbiola that has this hidden synthemata. You don't need to do what Levy says and like wake up at fucking 3 a.m. and walk 6 miles with a wounded dog to harvest a switch of hazel wand that is
Oh,
just in its maturity
we
three
don't have to
weeks
do
before.
that. Thank God.
No, no. Like again, it's just people that do that in 2024 again flex nuts.
Yeah.
Some of it is good because some of it in the beginning can sort of help you to connect more with the ritual and the process and help discipline you. I'm not completely discrediting it, but there are at a certain point, especially if you're talking about it,
Yeah.
it's like you have a website where you tell everybody that you do these long, complicated things. You're stroking yourself off. It's a fucking it's
It,
magical masturbation.
it's like when
Um,
somebody's like a workaholic and they're like, bro, I worked like 80 hours this week and like
yeah,
I've been busting my ass and like you don't even understand what work is or something
yeah,
like.
exactly. It's the same thing. You want a pat on the fucking back. But color, according to the Golden Dawn system, is really the system that pioneered this, removes that necessity because we understand that color is a force in and of itself. Color is a force. All the symbols we have, they're telling us they contain something, or they're telling us something symbolic about a force, but color is a force in and of itself. So we have, different colors, different bands. Each one of those is being consecrated to a particular zodiacal uh, constellation. And then the whole implement itself is being consecrated to one specific god, or maybe two gods, Isis and really, really Horus the Younger, Haruprakriti,
Mm.
is becomes the god of the lotus wand. This, it's because Horus the Younger rises out of the lotus. He's born out of a lotus. He's usually depicted sitting on a lotus. So that is consecrated to the zodiacal. Each band is consecrated to a zodiacal constellation in what is a fairly involved ritual, where you're literally working your way around the circle of the ecliptic, facing each constellation and doing this serious invocation and putting that energy, ensouling that band
Mm.
on that thing, and then consecrating the whole thing to an overarching God. We do that with the planets for something called the Phoenix Wand. So then that's the kind of stuff that you can do. Again, they're implements, but they're also talismanic. So you're doing a form of telestic to these things. Now, they're not alive in the same way the agama is, the animated statue. But we are using these things for different purposes. Um, and the theory behind them is a little different, right? One is much, much older, and one is much, much more recent. But I think that ideas like this, there is absolutely space for dialogue and interplay, and take what you know and what is usable, what works, just use it. Synthesize it and use it. Everybody is like, I mean, I lived in Brooklyn at the height of hipster culture. So I'm like sick of hearing people talk about how like some niche or super old thing is like, well, it's not, that's fine, but it's not the steel of Jehu, or it's like, who gives a shit? If it works, use the fucking thing, and in order for you to figure that out, you need to experiment widely, like I have, like my teachers have, like my friends have, so it's not about how fucking, cool and niche and esoteric you are, and how now you got to go on, you learn fucking 3 words of Greek and you change your Facebook name to something in Greek. It's just like, I don't get to complain about cultural appropriation, right? So it's like, meantime everybody online now is speaking fucking Greek. I learned how to read, from reading the fucking store signs traveling around Greece when I was like 7 years old, but it's just, there's a lot of, and you got to understand this, because this is what I'm saying when I say that people jump into theurgy and they haven't fixed themselves. And yes, you can fix yourself, because you could definitely be fucking wrong and broken. Many of us are. But that's the whole purpose of the curriculum that leads to theurgy. You're not going to really do any of this stuff to any real spiritual effect until you fix these fucked up things about you, or at the very least, notice how full of shit you are. That's essentially what the Platonic dialogues were about.
Yeah.
Know thyself is to know how full of shit you are. That's really it. And then to understand, well, why? Because I have this fear that is based on an illusion. And that illusion is that I am my body. And when the body dies, I die with it. Not only that, what the body needs, I need. And that pandering to the body and obeying its every thirst and its every quake and its every quiver is good. No, we are soul. Us. We are psyche. We are soul. Our true nature is diametrically opposed to matter. But we live here, chained here, as it were, for a time. And we need to learn, like the charioteer in the Phaedrus, how to get the white horse and the dark horse to fucking work together instead of one pulling up and one pulling down, and then doing something productive, making our way through the planets, through the stars. Um, that's really it. So when we talk about, I think a lot of this, embodied theurgy, yeah, of course it's embodied. I mean, this is semantics. You're not fucking actually, it's not NASA. You're not getting in a ship and going to the stars. That's insane. That's an absurdity. But you're using this cosmological system of archetypes in order to commune with the forms. And even though you don't physically go anywhere, your nous does change. Your psychic organization definitely experiences transformation. That does go somewhere. The thing that death can't take with it does go somewhere. It does change, yet you're still here. So let's not split hairs and talk about embodied theurgy, when embodied theurgy is just an abreaction against Christian moralizing and asceticism, and a very convenient way to allow myself to be a little bit of a hedonist and still pretend to be spiritual. So that's really what we're talking about here. At the end of the day, the old truths are the truths, okay? There is a God. The soul exists and it survives death. You will be accountable. The only way through is discipline. You are accountable for the choices you make that affect your soul, that it becomes conditioned by the impulses of matter, which are fundamentally juxtaposed to the nature of soul itself. And that in making these choices, where you cede to the illusion, you give in to the illusion of matter, and you pretend for a moment, I'm not soul, I'm body. That will change. It will fundamentally alter over time your soul. It will become more confused, more terrestrial bound, and will inherit what Plato says, or Socrates says through Plato in the Phaedo. The only thing you bring with you through the various metempsychoses, the transmigration of the soul, your reincarnations, is your habits. That's the only thing you bring with you, and that depends on that, and that it's a feedback loop, right? My habits inform my choices, inform my experiences, inform my habits, inform my choices, inform my experiences, inform my habits. And it's just that over and over. And the soul is never still. It's either moving down towards highly and towards confusion, stooping down, right? Like the Chaldean Oracles say, stoop not down into that darkly splendid world wherein lieth Hades, wrapped in gloom, a continually faithless depth, delighting in unintelligible images, and a precipitous, black winding, an ever rolling abyss, ever espousing a body unluminous, formless, and void. It tells you right there, do not stoop down into the darkly splendid world. Do not do that. And yet we want to talk about doing it. And we'll find all these little weird nuances and these little niche sayings, and we'll very conveniently bend meanings to make them what we think they should be, to align more with this very cool, chill Buddhist kind of way of doing things. That's not what the fuck they're talking about. It's just not. It's not. I wish it were. It would be easier for me.
Okay. Opinion. What do you think about the superiority of ritual over intellectual contemplation alone? There's obviously these various practices where it's very just intellectual contemplation based versus practices that incorporate ritual. And you kind of said something earlier that was it's like it's not only that uh, it's ritual and intellectual contemplation, which I thought was
Mhm.
cool. But yeah, anyway, go ahead, reply.
I don't think one is better than the other. I think people, depending on their state of soul development, their habits, are more suited to one or the other, or perhaps both. Um, there is that classic tale of the magician and the mystic. You know, we don't do mysticism in magic necessarily. We don't have to. You look at the PGM, right, and what Skinner has to say about it being a techne. All those things are they're just crafts. They don't have anything to do with spiritual development. The mysteries, right? The Mithras liturgy and stuff like that. Those are the more mystical, initiatic mystery rites. But I think, like all things in life, a healthy balance of both is what's important. And I think that, like, if somebody told, and I think I said this recently, I forget where, but if somebody told me that in order to continue to practice magic, I had to give up my meditation and my Qigong practice, I would tell them no. Personally, I would rather have the ability to meditate every day
Mm,
than do anything else.
yeah.
Uh, So ritual is good, but there's a lot of bullshit that comes with it. A lot of bullshit that comes with meditation too, and it all has to do with image. It all has to do with reifying this new concept of yourself, you know, uh, and hardening something in ego and in image. When really what we're supposed to be doing is we're supposed to be dissolving that to one degree, or at least rendering it powerless in those ways specifically. But I think both of those things for somebody like me are great. I know people that are possessed of great spiritual brilliance, but will not do ritual because it makes them feel silly. And I think that's okay. I think that's fine, you know.
Hmm.
Um, but
Some of
I
my
I
favorite
would,
people.
yeah, yeah, me too. And I started out that way, really, was I preferred mysticism, but I also realized, the contemplative stuff, that's your juice, man. That's your juice. It's way easy to kind of just kid yourself in magic.
Yeah.
It's actually scarily easy to do that. And to see people do it for years and sometimes decades is scary. And we have that classic case of ego inflation that people are always warning us about. We're constantly witnessing in magic. It's one of the reasons people stay away from orders now because they have some bad apples will ruin the bunch truly. But I think both. If you're asking me my opinion, what you've got to have both. And I do think that the golden dawn, the way we practice it, This is why I truly believe like you can't be the older is better type of fucking nerd
Yeah, yeah.
because like you don't have what they had. It doesn't matter. You search for fucking years. It doesn't matter. So the I know that the Stella Matutina stuff of the Golden Dawn that combines these visualizations, and even the newer stuff that people like Chick Tabby, Adam Forrest put in, that's a really nice blend of contemplative visualization work. And then people say, well, that's not what the founders of the Golden Dawn were doing. Like, yeah, but they fucking ate each other.
Yeah.
This has been around way long. Chicken Tabby's order has fucking lapped them by several decades. The Golden Dawn was not together long.
But
You
that's
know,
like
it
your point about like it's like a living tradition. It's not just this tradition that we're just like looking back to and trying to replicate exactly how things were. It's like it's living and it's evolving and it's alive. And like that's, I mean, fucking awesome. That's, yeah.
it 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 has to be. This is what you look at the Platonic stuff, right? The Cratylus and the Theaetetus. He talks about how this is the manifestation, the material realm, the sensible realm. It's not a world of being, it's a world of becoming. And so everything moves like rivers. And sometimes they meet and sometimes they part, but everything's in constant motion. And that's why we can say things like, well, this is my truth. Or you can say one thing that's true now, and then later it's like, well, it's not true anymore. These are serious concerns in materiality. But the main thing, the rule of the realm, is movement, change.
The only
Plato
constant.
says that that is the realm. Yeah, and that's why he says when you incline to relaxation too much, your body decays. If you're not moving in life and you are resting, you're sitting still, you are choosing not to participate in the rule of becoming, and so you will tend towards death. You're setting up your exit. And I think that that's what orders and magical societies who refuse to change, who are constantly trying to go back and reconstruct the edifice bit by bit, all they're doing is they're just setting up their own downfall because it's you're not you're the law of the land here is change, evolution, flow like the river instead of thinking you're in fucking charge. No, no, no. I know that we got to get back to this, and I'm chiseling
Yeah.
away. We're gonna. It's not a good. That right there is gonna stunt your spiritual understanding.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like if I was gonna go be like, oh, when I was 15, I could do this or that, and I had all this energy and da 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 da. Like I should try to replicate myself exactly how I was when I was 15. It's like it's not gonna happen. But I don't
Yeah.
know. Anyway, is there any other thoughts that you want to have in regards to theurgy or just any closing statements in general before we sign off?
Yeah, I would like to reemphasize all the prerequisite work that goes into uh becoming a theurgist. There you have the ladder of the virtues, which I know we've spoken of in the past on this podcast, but it's several groupings of virtues that lead from the most immediate, the natural virtues. They lead up through the ethic, the civic. They go up through the philosophical virtues, the contemplative, the purificatory, the paradigmatic, and then finally at the seventh and last virtue, you've now accumulated what we call the hieratic virtue, the priestly virtue, right? Hiera, you were saying that before, the priestly virtue. I can now perform these mystery rites, which are theurgic. So you take a look at the Iamblician curriculum of the Platonic dialogues according to Olympiodorus. Doris, talk to me about it. Uh, Come to the classes if you want, if you can. We talk about how these things are laying out the foundations for initiation, giving us our context, helping us to know the difference between self and not self, being and not being, soul and not soul, and then how all that stuff is constructed in a way where we can apply philosophy as a medicine to the soul and heal it. Because the soul has to heal before it can perform theurgic rites. And the last thing that I want to say is that we ascribe the Chaldean Oracles, from which the theurgic rites that we talk about and we know so well, to a pair called the Giuliani. Right? A uh it's supposed that they're father and son pair, but I see a lot in that kind of like acolyte mentor relationship that is always approaching father son familial things. So I don't know that that's a literal thing. But they basically talk about how Julian the Chaldean philosopher, the Babylonian philosopher, prayed that his son would have the diamond or be inhabited by the spirit of an archangel. And it was from that period where Julian, the younger Julian, the theurgist, as he's referred to, claimed to have been able to achieve oracular states or transcendental states where he would receive teachings from the soul of Plato. So even at this late period in this theurgic development, it all devolves down to Plato. All of it. You cannot do theurgy. You will not understand theurgy if you do not understand Plato. It's all there. It's all you could spend you could spend lifetimes studying these Platonic dialogues, and still they would be giving things to you. But the main thing is that, like the other documents, they don't give you a delineated practice. There is a tradition within the tradition that is referred to twice in two of his major works by Aristotle. Aristotle was the empiricist. He conserved his words. He didn't speak falsehoods. He was an empiricist. He didn't say stuff if it was bullshit. And he talks about the agrapha dogmata, the unwritten doctrines of Plato. Now, a society of scholars in the 12th century decided, oh, we're going to find out what these unwritten doctrines are, right? And guess where they were located? Tübingen, which a couple hundred years later, the Rosicrucian fraternity, or at least the manifestos, came out of Tübingen about 300 years later, maybe 400 years later. But in the 12th century, the group of Platonic scholars were trying to figure out what this unwritten doctrine was. They essentially said it was the three hypostases, or at least part of it was the three hypostases of Plotinus. It was so well known and such well worn territory in the Platonic tradition at that time that he was just speaking about it openly. Secondly, it was Porphyry who collected his documents posthumously and then distributed or made them readable. Plotinus had no plans to preserve his work and then publish them, so it would have remained private documents and therefore quote unquote unwritten, unpublished at least. So, but essentially, there's another school of thought that says the unwritten doctrines were what you were supposed to do with all this stuff. Now, for Plato, ostensibly, a lot of this stuff was just becoming philosophical was enough, because that in and of itself is a journey of lifetimes. And in the myth of the afterlife in the Phaedo, it's only the philosophers who get to go on and coexist. They get to step off the wheel of incarnation and go even ahead of the holy or pious people. They get to dwell with the forms. They get to dwell in that abstract space about which Socrates cannot say anything. So there's that. But if you look at the two streams of praxis that came out of that, the school of Theoria, divine contemplation, and the school of Theurgia, there is something that I think most people find true, urgent, and fulfilling on one level, but incomplete on another, because they're still compelled after doing the acquiring the virtues and arete and eudaimonia and becoming a philosopher. They still feel like they need to practice some form of henostic system, right? Union with the divine. So I would say approach that likewise. Begin with Plato, move on from there. Otherwise, you may be kidding yourself. And that's the final word.
Thank God we have Plato. So lucky.
Yeah. Oh, we
Awesome.
are.
Thank you so much, man. Oh, that was a blast. I'm so glad that we did it. Cool. Well then, uh, thank you everybody who's subscribed here and who's listening and supporting us here on the Patreon. It means uh so much. Um, and hopefully we can try to do some kind of consistent interval. I know there's just been a lot of chaos and craziness going on lately. You've had the flooding situation there.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of crazy chaos in my life personally, but we'll figure it out, and we'll always try to continue to pump out good shit for you guys. So thanks all. Thank you everybody who's subscribed and listening, and yeah, until next time.
Thanks for the good questions, Sky.
Absolutely. That's what I'm here for.